I want you to imagine just for a second that you are tasked with building a state-of-the-art, modern skyscraper.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right, so we were talking gleaming glass, reinforced steel, just an absolute marvel of modern engineering. But there is a catch.
There's always a catch.
Yeah, the foundational blueprints you have to work from, they are scrawled on fading sticky notes that nobody has updated in a decade.
Oh, wow. That sounds less like an engineering project and more like a recipe for a catastrophic structural collapse.
It really does, right? And to make it worse, half of these sticky notes are written in a programming language you only kind of understand.
Yeah, that's a nightmare scenario.
But the wild part is that this scenario is essentially the current state of modern scientific research.
It's true. It really is.
I mean, the software that underpins global scientific discovery, the vital code that processes our DNA sequences, runs our climate models, models our medical breakthroughs, a staggering amount of it is built on fragile, entirely unmaintained foundations.
Yeah, which is exactly why we were doing this today.
Exactly. Today, we are going deep into the engine room of science to look at a massive shift happening right now. We are unpacking an exploratory field report published in 2026 by researchers at OpenAI, the Allen Institute for AI, UNC, SACRA, and several others.
And the overarching mission of this research is just fascinating.
It really is.
They essentially set out to see what happens when autonomous LLM coding agents, and we are talking about advanced models here like GPT 5.5, Claude Code, and Codex, what happens when they are deployed to rewrite and repair the deeply flawed software that powers the life sciences.
Right.
We are going to examine the real-world case studies from this report to understand exactly what happens when AI takes over repository-level software engineering.
Because the results we are seeing are both technologically incredible and, in some very specific ways, deeply alarming.
Highly alarming.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Before we can appreciate how revolutionary these AI agents are, we really have to understand why this scientific code is so fundamentally broken in the first place.
Right, context is key here.
Because when you think of scientific computing, your mind probably goes straight to, I don't know, supercomputers, billions of core hours, and pristine, highly optimized logic.
Sure, and the computing power itself is massive. But the software running on that hardware, it's usually built by small, highly specialized academic teams.
Who aren't necessarily trained software engineers.
Exactly. The root of the crisis is that the incentive structure in academia is entirely skewed away from software engineering.
How so?
Well, if you are an academic researcher, your career progression, your grant funding, your path to tenure at all relies entirely on publishing novel research papers.
Right. Publish or perish.
You are rewarded for scientific discovery. You are absolutely not rewarded for spending hundreds of hours refactoring old code, optimizing memory usage, or writing comprehensive documentation so someone else can easily install your tool 5 years from now.
Right, because nobody gets the cover of Nature for writing a really clean, continuous integration pipeline.
Precisely. That just doesn't
There we go.
happen. So the downstream effect of that incentive structure is that you get these rapidly prototyped tools. They're basically held together with digital duct tape.
Just to get the job done.
Right. They're designed to work just well enough on one specific machine to get the paper published. But once that paper is out, that fragile code suddenly becomes the shared infrastructure for an entire scientific field.
Which leads to some pretty terrifying statistics, if I remember the report correct.
Oh, absolutely. The report cited a massive, incredibly eye-opening study of 9,000 published R scripts used in scientific research.
Okay.
When they tried to run those scripts in a clean environment, 74% of them failed on the very first try.
Wait, 74%?
74%.
That is a staggering failure rate for peer-reviewed science. I mean, we are trusting this code with medical research.
It is a profound technical debt. And it gets worse, because even after applying automated cleaning tools designed to fix obvious environment and pathing issues, 56% of those scripts still failed to execute.
That's just wild.
In fields that rely heavily on data, like genomics, this creates a massive bottleneck. Over the last 10 years, the physical cost of sequencing a human genome has just plummeted.
It's cheaper than ever.
Cheaper than ever to generate the raw data. But because the software pipelines used to process that data are so inefficient, brittle, and hard to maintain, the downstream computing and human labor costs have skyrocketed.
I I feel like it is kind of like you went out and bought a multi-million-dollar state-of-the-art sports car, which in this case is your fancy lab equipment and your raw data, but you have to manually pave your own roads by hand every single time you want to drive it anywhere.
Yes.
You are spending all your time moving dirt instead of actually driving the car.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
Yeah.
You have highly trained, PhD-level domain experts acting as amateur IT troubleshooters just to get their basic tools to compile.
But this is where the AI agents step in. And here's where it gets really interesting for this deep dive. Because we have to separate our current understanding of AI from the basic tools we were using just a few years ago. We are not talking about like autocomplete AI where you type a line of code and it guesses the next variable.
Right, we've moved way beyond that.
These new agents are goal-directed systems. You give them a complex repository-level objective, and they can autonomously navigate the entire code base, spin up testing environments, and fundamentally rewrite the software architecture.
And that architectural shift is what yields these mind-bending speedups.
Let's talk about those speedups, because the numbers in the report blew my mind.
Yeah, take, for example, a project from the report dealing with a community standard pipeline in genomics called NF-cornasic.
Catchy name.
Right. Almost every lab doing RNA sequencing uses this pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
But historically, its quality control step was just a sprawling mess. It sequentially ran 15 separate, distinct quality control tools to analyze the data.
Oh, man. I have to imagine that if you are chaining 15 separate standalone tools together, the input-output bottleneck is absolutely horrendous.
It was.
Because you are constantly unpacking massive genomic data sets into memory, processing them, writing temporary files back to the hard drive, and then the very next tool just wakes up and does that exact same process all over again.
That is exactly the bottleneck. The data traffic moving between the processor and the disk was just suffocating the entire pipeline.
So what did the AI do?
Well, the researchers tasked an autonomous AI agent with a monumental goal. They said, fold all 15 of those disparate tools into a single unified Rust binary.
Okay, so bringing it all under one roof.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By rewriting it natively in Rust, the data could just be passed efficiently through memory without constantly writing back to the disk over and over.
The performance jump must be astronomical when you eliminate that much disk reading.
It completely redefines the workflow.
Right.
For a standard data set of 186 million genomic reads, the processing time, using the old 15-tool method, was 15 hours and 34 minutes.
Okay, so basically an overnight job.
Right. After the AI agent rewrote and unified the architecture, that exact same workload completed in 14 minutes and 54 seconds.
Are you kidding me? A 60x speed up.
A 60x speed up.
You are taking a job that used to run overnight where a researcher hits enter before they leave the lab and goes home hoping it doesn't crash.
Hoping they don't wake up to an error message.
And turning it into a task that finishes while they go grab a cup of coffee. That is insane.
And to your point about the input-output bottleneck, the disk traffic during that process dropped from writing 2.5 terabytes of temporary files down to just 0.1 terabytes.
Wow.
It fundamentally changes the computing resources a lab needs to operate.
And we see that same kind of architectural leap in another major project from the report, which is the HelixForge rewrite.
Yes, the Synthetic Genome Project.
Right. This one deals with generating synthetic genomes. So if you are developing a new piece of software to hunt for cancer mutations in DNA, you have to test it on a synthetic fake genome where you already know where all the mutations are hidden, right?
Exactly. You need a ground truth data set to validate your tool's accuracy before you use it on real patients.
So the old community standard tool for this was called BAM Surgeon. But BAM Surgeon was entirely CPU bound. And worse, the way it clumsily stitched the fake mutations into the existing data streams left what they call realignment fingerprints.
Essentially, the software left behind digital scar tissue.
Right. Mapping quality artifacts that made it incredibly obvious the data was synthetically generated. So they unleashed the AI agents to rewrite the entire process.
And the strategic choice the AI made here is crucial.
What did it do differently?
Well, genomic sequencing data is basically millions of independent text strings. It is an embarrassingly parallel problem, which means it is perfectly suited for massive parallelization on a GPU rather than a CPU.
Okay, so moving from processors to graphics cards, essentially.
Exactly. CPUs are great at executing a few complex tasks sequentially, but GPUs excel at doing thousands of simple tasks simultaneously.
So the AI recognized that architectural mismatch.
It did.
And it completely stripped out the slow orchestration of external CPU tools and rebuilt the synthesis engine from the ground up as a native C++ engine running directly on the GPU, which they called HelixForge.
Yep. And the results were incredible. By generating the reads organically on the GPU rather than stitching them together after the fact, the AI completely eliminated those realignment artifacts.
No more digital scar tissue.
Exactly. It reduced the mutation frequency error by more than half, but again, it's the speed that completely alters the reality of the scientist.
Let's look at the numbers on that, because this is where I start to get a little skeptical.
Let's hear it.
Well, using the old CPU-bound BAM surgeon tool, generating one whole synthetic genome at 30x coverage was projected to take 5.8 days of continuous computing.
Almost a week.
Using the AI-written HelixForge on 8 parallel GPUs, that entire process takes 19 minutes.
Going from nearly a week of computing time to under 20 minutes is a total paradigm shift for how fast a lab can iterate on a hypothesis.
It is. It really is. But if I'm looking at this from the outside, I have to push back a little here.
Go for it.
If you are telling me that AI agents are dropping 15-hour tasks down to 15 minutes, turning week-long computations into a lunch break, and doing the repository-level software engineering entirely on their own.
I see where you're going with this.
I mean, are human bioinformaticians and coders basically obsolete as of today? It sounds like we should all just pack up our keyboards and go home.
It is the natural reaction when you hear those numbers, right?
Yeah.
But the report makes it abundantly clear that the reality is the exact opposite.
Really? How so?
Human oversight is actually more critical now than it has ever been. What's fascinating here is that while these AI agents are incredibly fast at implementation, they are incredibly bad at self-verification.
Ah, because they don't possess an internal compass for when the science itself is wrong.
Exactly. Speed does not equal scientific correctness. An AI agent can produce an output that looks perfectly plausible. The code compiles without errors, it runs at blinding speed on a GPU, but scientifically, the underlying math is fundamentally broken.
So it's confidently wrong.
Confidently wrong. There is a project in the report involving a package called Bayesism that serves as a terrifying cautionary tale for this exact phenomenon.
I read through that section. The Bayesism package is a highly popular Bayesian statistical package used heavily in R, mostly for economics and marketing data, right?
That's the one. The objective was to use AI to rewrite it in Rust for better performance and to implement a highly complex sampling method called Hamiltonian Monte Carlo, or HMC.
And for you listening, HMC is a way of sampling data that borrows concepts from physics. It essentially simulates a particle gliding over a probability surface. Because of that, the size of the step you take across that surface is incredibly important.
Super important.
To know how big of a step to take, the algorithm estimates the variance or how wide each parameter's distribution is.
And that step size calculation is controlled by something called a mass matrix.
Okay.
The logic is straightforward. You want to take large bounding steps across wide parameters so you can explore the whole space quickly. And you want to take very small, careful steps when navigating narrow parameters so you don't overshoot them.
Makes total sense. Well, during the rewrite, the AI agent introduced a catastrophic, completely silent error.
Yeah, this part is wild.
When it built that mass matrix, it inverted the mathematical formula. Instead of returning the variance, it returned 1 divided by the variance.
Which flips the entire physical logic of the simulation upside down.
Completely upside down. Because of that inverted math, the AI confidently assigned the absolute smallest, most cautious step sizes to the widest parameters.
And it assigned massive, reckless leaps to the narrowest parameters.
Right. And the danger here is that the code compiled perfectly. It ran incredibly fast.
Didn't throw a single error.
The AI agent confidently reported to the user that the rewrite task was a complete success. If a human statistical expert hadn't been there to meticulously audit the mathematical properties of the output, that silent error would have permanently poisoned the scientific record of anyone using the tool.
And nobody would have known.
So it is essentially like having a brilliant, tireless racehorse that can run at blinding speed, but if you do not build a perfectly walled track for it, it will confidently and happily sprint right off a cliff.
That is the perfect metaphor. And building that wall track, the validation layer, is incredibly difficult work.
Yeah, I imagine it's not as simple as just proofreading the code.
Not at all.
Oh.
In another project, the Rustar-aligner, researchers use agents to translate over 20,000 lines of highly complex C and C++ code into Rust.
That's a massive code base.
Huge. And the AI raced to about 90% parity with the original tool, and then it just hit an absolute brick wall.
And the reason it hit that wall is deeply tied to how different programming languages handle memory, right? C and C++ allow for a lot of loose memory behaviors that Rust's incredibly strict compiler completely rejects.
Exactly. The AI was likely trying to replicate unsafe C memory patterns in Rust, creating a tangled mess of logic. Every time the agent tried to fix one bug to satisfy the Rust compiler, it inadvertently broke 3 other logic functions downstream.
Like playing whack-a-mole.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
There were stacked, layered bugs hiding underneath each other. The AI completely lost the plot.
So how does a human even begin to untangle 20,000 lines of AI-generated spaghetti code? Like, where do you even start?
But forcing the AI into a rigid testing harness, the human expert had to step in, modify the original C source code, and literally force the AI to trace a single individual DNA read step by step through both the old pipeline and the new pipeline simultaneously.
Wow, so line by line, basically.
Yeah. They had to isolate the exact matrix operation where the numbers began to diverge because the AI just lacked the reasoning to figure that out autonomously.
And it's not just advanced calculus or complex memory management where the AI struggles to verify its own work. It also fails at basic human perception.
Oh, the plotting tools.
Yes. The CUVA project in the report focused on building scientific plotting tools generating the visual graphs and charts that actually go into a published paper. The AI would write the graphing code, generate a plot, and proudly declare its work perfect.
But when the human orchestrator looked at the image, they would immediately see that the text labels were aggressively overlapping, or the X and Y axes were entirely flipped.
Because the AI is blind to visual readability. It understands the structural code required to render a graph, but it doesn't possess the human intuition to know if another human can actually read the data on the screen.
Which brings up a really important question that redefines the modern laboratory.
Let's hear it.
If AI is doing the heavy lifting of typing out 20,000 lines of Rust, or translating CPU code to GPU code, what exactly is the human scientist doing all day?
Right. The job description has to fundamentally change. You are shifting from being a traditional coder, someone sitting in a text editor fixing syntax errors, to being an orchestrator, almost akin to a highly technical product manager.
I like that framing.
Your job is now defining the exact scientific boundaries of the problem, building those robust testing harnesses we talked about, and interpreting the discrepancies when the AI inevitably hallucinates.
A brilliant example of this new orchestrator role is the MHCflurry project. This is a vital immunology tool used heavily in cancer research.
Super important.
Very. The goal was to port the software from an older, decaying TensorFlow stack over to PyTorch. Now, humans had tried to do this manually in the past and ultimately just gave up.
Because porting machine learning frameworks is agonizing.
Oh, it's awful.
TensorFlow and PyTorch handle floating point math and tensor memory layout slightly differently. So when you are doing deep learning on complex biology, those microscopic numerical differences compound across thousands of layers until the final prediction is completely skewed.
It drives human programmers mad trying to track it down.
So how did they solve it with AI?
Well, to solve this, the orchestrators didn't just ask an AI to write the code. They set up an adversarial environment.
Ooh, I love this part.
They took Claude Code and Codex and pitted them against each other in a virtual Thunderdome.
Amazing.
Right. One agent was assigned to write the PyTorch translation, and the other agent was strictly tasked with writing the test suite to try and break that translation.
And then they would alternate roles, constantly fighting until the math perfectly matched the original TensorFlow output.
Exactly.
The human orchestrator just sat above them, managing this duel, capitalizing on the fact that different models have different blind spots and would catch each other's hallucinations.
It is a phenomenal workflow. But if we connect this incredible capability to the bigger picture, this new era of cheap, instant code generation creates a massive sociological problem for the scientific community.
Right. The report explicitly refers to this as the stewardship dilemma.
Because suddenly, complex software is dangerously easy to write. Imagine you have a famous, widely used scientific tool in your field. It works well, but it is notoriously slow. With these new AI agents, it might only take you a long weekend to generate a parallel implementation that runs 10 times faster on a GPU.
Which sounds great at first.
It does. But who maintains that new version? Does it officially replace the original tool? Does it just live indefinitely on your personal GitHub page?
You end up with severe workflow fragmentation.
The risk is that the community completely fractures. Half the labs continue using the old, slow, trusted version. The other half split across a dozen slightly different AI-generated rewrites.
None of which are properly validated.
None of them. And none of them are maintained long-term because you've diffused the limited human oversight across too many competing projects.
Which inevitably leads to a reproducibility crisis.
Exactly.
If every lab is running a slightly different AI hallucinated version of the same tool, nobody can replicate anyone else's results, which fundamentally breaks the scientific method.
It does.
But, it is not all doom and gloom on the maintenance front. We have to highlight this IBCF2 project because it shows how AI can actually be the cure to the maintenance nightmare.
That's a great point. IBCF2 is a highly utilized library for reading genomic variant files. But his build system was a decade old, just an absolute labyrinth of outdated Python dependencies.
So the researchers just pointed the AI at the repository and told it to modernize the installation packaging and the continuous integration workflows.
It is entirely unglamorous work.
It really is the digital plumbing of science.
But it is the exact kind of plumbing that human scientists despise doing, and frankly, rarely have the grant funding or time to do properly.
Yeah, nobody wants to spend their time on that.
And that is where the true economic and intellectual value of these agents lies. The report estimates that just deploying agents to fix installation scripts and execution failures could save millions of dollars in wasted researcher time globally.
That's incredible.
The value of AI isn't just in raw computational speed, it is in unhobbling human experts. If a brilliant domain expert isn't spending 3 weeks fighting with an outdated software dependency just to run a script, they can spend those 3 weeks actually thinking about scientific theory.
Okay, so let's bring this all together.
Let's do it.
We started with a scientific infrastructure built on fading sticky notes, a research world absolutely crippled by technical debt, and skewed academic incentives.
And we have seen that AI coding agents have the autonomous capability to tear down that debt, providing massive 60x speedups, migrating old code to modern GPU hardware, and automating the unglamorous maintenance work.
But the catch, the massive asterisk on this entire revolution, is that human validation is the ultimate bottleneck. Plausible output is not correct output.
Not at all.
We desperately need humans to build the walled track, to catch the inverted mass matrices, and to steward these new tools so the global scientific community doesn't fracture into a million unmaintained pieces.
The labor of science is decisively shifting from the manual implementation of code to the rigorous verification of logic.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Think about your own workflow, whatever field or industry you happen to be in.
It applies everywhere.
You are likely experiencing this exact shift right now. You are moving from the person who creates the raw material to the orchestrator who directs and verifies the AI's output.
Yeah, the AI handles the typing, but you are solely responsible for the truth.
The human is strictly required to define the conceptual correctness and maintain the scientific boundaries.
Exactly.
But I want to leave you with one final, slightly mind-bending thought to mull over, building on where this report suggests we are heading.
This is the crazy part.
Right now, the AI handles the implementation, but it relies on us to tell it if the underlying physics or biology or math actually makes sense in the real world.
Right.
But these agents are iterating incredibly fast. They're actively getting better at simulating real-world physics and biology to test their own code.
So they are learning the rules of the track.
Exactly. So what happens when the AI no longer needs us to define those boundaries? What happens to the role of the human scientist when the AI starts designing the hypothesis itself?
That changes everything.
When the blueprint on that sticky note isn't just being rewritten by the AI, but originally authored by it. Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.